It's hard to believe that it has been over 10 years since the original Mass Effect game was released for the Xbox 360 back in 2007. While the series is now synonymous with sci-fi video games and is one of BioWare's biggest franchises, back then it was a relatively unknown game with only the company's reputation to back it up. For this review, we will be examining the first game in the series, and while the games that came after it are impossible to ignore, we want to judge the game on its own merits and not the franchise as a whole. So with that in mind, let's dive into this now legendary title and see how it stands up to today's standards. Mass Effect is a heavily story-driven third-person action RPG. The protagonist of the game is Commander Shepard, a soldier in the Systems Alliance, the main representation for human interests in the galaxy. Upon creating a new character, you will choose Shepard's gender, background, and class. Your background will change what happened to Shepard growing up, as well as what accomplishments they have had in their military career so far. This influences various interactions that Shepard will have during his or her campaign, as well as open up a few character-specific missions later on. Gender will affect how various characters treat Shepard, as well as what relationships he or she can get involved with, both in this game as well as its sequels. Both versions of Shepard are well acted by Jennifer Hale and Mark Muir respectively, though in my personal opinion, Jennifer Hale blows the role away.
This is Commander Shepard speaking.
We have our orders. Find Saren before he finds the conduit. I won't lie to you, crew. This mission isn't going to be easy.
For too long, our species has stood apart from the others.
Now it's time for us to step up and do our part for the rest of the galaxy. Time to show them what humans are made of.
Our enemy knows we're coming.
When we go into the Traverse, Saren's followers will be waiting for us. But we'll be ready for them, too.
Humanity needs to do this.
Not just for our own sake, but for the sake of every other species in Citadel space. Saren must be stopped, and I promise you all, we will stop him.
The final thing that you choose is the class of your character. This will affect how your character will handle during battles, as well as what different abilities your character will receive as you progress. There are 3 types of combat abilities that you can use in the game's mini firefights. They are grouped into 3 different variations known as Assault, Technical, and Biotic. The player can choose a pure assault class known as the Soldier if they want to focus primarily on shooting and heavy armor upgrades. A player wanting to go a full technical route has a class known as the Engineer, which is more ingrained in hacking than any other class. A purely biotic focused individual can use a class known as the Adept, which has the ability to sling all sorts of abilities that can really be only classified as, well, space magic. There are also 3 combination classes that meld certain abilities between the other classes, but also don't have the full advantages of any of them. A combination of the Biotic and the Soldier is known as the Vanguard, a combination of the Soldier and the Engineer is known as the Infiltrator, and a combination of the Engineer and the Biotic is known as the Sentinel. These classes would later be expanded upon in later games, but in this game they all play really similar to each other, and the only thing that really differentiates them is the different abilities that you receive. Classes that have assault abilities will be more adept at using weaponry, with the Soldier class being able to expertly use all types of weapons. The first time you play through the game, Biotic and Technical classes can only use pistols reliably, but have a myriad of other abilities to use instead. Technical classes have abilities to use against electronic enemies, and will find decrypting and hacking to be significantly easier if points are put in the respective categories. Under most circumstances, you would think that the Technical class would be the weakest of the classes, but since there is no shortage of electronic enemies for the main character to fight in the story, Technical classes tend to keep up with everybody else without much difficulty. Biotic abilities are probably the most unique of the 3, allowing you to throw, knock down, and otherwise incapacitate your enemies. While the full aspects of these abilities wouldn't be fully realized until the game's sequels, they were still immensely effective in the original Mass Effect. After creating your character and getting started, you are thrust into the story. As Shepard, you are on a mission to recover an ancient artifact from an alien species that has been extinct for several thousand years. The recovery of this device is also a test to see whether or not you are worthy of joining the group known as the Spectres, a nearly lawless group of individuals who are tasked with policing the galaxy no matter the cost. During the mission, Shepard interrupts an attack on a human settlement by a group known as the Geth, a synthetic species that are considered enigmatic at best. The Geth are being led by Saren, a rogue Spectre who seems to harbor a distinct hatred for humans. Through a series of events, Shepard is allowed into the Spectres and is tasked with finding Saren and will gain various party members who, with enough prodding, will tell you about themselves, and in some cases give you side quests that you can try to complete. And sex. While the overall plot itself boils down to find the bad guy and stop him, the writing and character interactions is what makes the story great. Each of your companions has their own personality, and even if you don't like them, they're memorable. The game is also the first BioWare game to introduce what is now known as the dialogue wheel, which allows the player to steer conversations to some extent. Conversations will also affect Shepard's morality, either pushing them towards Paragon, which is good, or Renegade, which is bad. The more points you have in one side or the other will allow you to make certain choices later on in the game. While the feature is fun to an extent, the mechanic will end up punishing you if you play a neutral character, as you won't really have enough Paragon or Renegade points to make certain choices later in the game, unless you cheat. Which, I mean, you can do that too. If you decide not to cheat, this can have huge consequences, such as not being able to resolve certain situations peacefully, or even losing one of your squad mates because you don't have the ability to convince them that you were doing things for the right reasons. As you progress through the game and get to know your squad mates more, you have the option of allowing Shepard to enter a romantic relationship with certain characters. Ashley for a male Shepard, Kaidan for a female Shepard, and Liara for both. The romance options are further expanded in later games, allowing for female Shepards to enter a relationship with many other characters, including Garrus, one of the few characters that can be a squad mate for you in all three games, who is also a species known as a Turian, and male Shepards can get to know a few more individuals, including Kaidan and Tali, who is a Quarian, a species that has an extremely weak immune system, which forces them to live inside their suits for the majority of their lives. When it comes to character control, the game is a bit stiff. Combat is clunky, with Shepard moving at a fairly slow pace and bouncing up and down with every movement. Aiming isn't exact, as you are given an area of effectiveness circle that will give you an idea of where you might possibly hit when you pull the trigger. As you become more trained with the weapon, the circle will become relatively small, but if you're untrained, which for most weapons will be the majority of playable classes, the weapon's circle will be huge, making any attempts at trying to use the weapon pointless. The game also allows you to land on various planets throughout the solar system, which is a neat idea, in theory, but in actuality it's painfully tedious and repetitive. There simply isn't enough to do to make these various planets interesting, and the vehicle you use, known as the Mako, controls like an elephant piloting a blimp. The landscapes are also often extremely large, but have very little to do with them, making them time sinks that most won't want to deal with. This ends up actually becoming somewhat of an annoyance, as you have to jump into this vehicle for every main storyline mission, and quite a few side quests require you to go out into the middle of nowhere and try to drive around until you find what you're looking for. So I guess the question is the game worth playing now? And to tell the truth, I have to borrow the immortal words of a one Tina Belcher. You see, I've personally played through the Mass Effect series multiple times, and the answer to that question is not easy. For a person who has never played the series before, I feel like it's the best way to get the most out of the series, but it's easily the hardest of the games to get into. It is by far the roughest of the series, even when compared to the many issues that Mass Effect Andromeda had upon release. That being said, it can be enjoyable once you really get into it, and certain side quests will only port over if you've played the first game and have transferred over your save. For players who are coming back after having played the later games in the series, it's a bit harder to recommend from a gameplay standpoint, simply because it isn't that great. If you want to go through and get your full, perfect game, then go for it. Playing the game is pretty much necessary for that. However, after standing back, it's still a good game, but it's just not as good as you probably want to remember it. I say this with a lot of love, as I've gone through each of the original trilogy and played them multiple times. I don't say these things to be mean-spirited or nitpicky, it's just a fact that the game has not aged as well as most people want to admit. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't love the gameplay if you did. I mean, if it was your cup of tea, then great, have at it. But it's my personal opinion that the gameplay has not aged particularly well. With all that being said, however, it is a game that I am going to fondly remember for probably my entire life. So despite the negative things that I'm saying about it here, it is a game that I will love and hold deep in my heart, both for the things that it has done well, as well as its flaws. Hi, thank you for watching my retro review of Mass Effect. I'm certain that my point of view is going to be slightly controversial, but honestly, if you have any opinions of your own, feel free to comment down below. And if you liked my video, whether you agree with me or not, feel free to subscribe. I won't say no to that. That would be really, really nice. And also, if you like the video, there's a thumbs up thing right there. If you wanna press it. If you don't, that's cool. I'm just saying, it's there.